John, Rich, go for it.
Cool. Radio. Yeah, so thanks. And then so let's have a quick look then at what's new in 1.17. There's been a bit of a lot of stuff that's been going on that's kind of like behind the scenes. There's not lots of new features and functionalities. There's been some boring architectural changes, but we'll in this session we'll have a quick look at the exciting features and functionality that have come in. So going through them very quickly, these are the key 5 pieces, and we'll talk about some new stuff afterwards as well. So we've got independent border and padding control, which we'll have a look at. We've rewritten and completely redone the color picker to give ourselves capability in the future for gradients. We've added the ability to support Google Tag Manager, custom CSS and custom JavaScript code, and the horizontal repeat container as well. So if I jump into Squirrel, if I can find my Squirrel screen. Here we go. So in Squirrel now, let's have a look at the independent border control setting. So previously, if I brought on a rectangle, for example, in Squirrel, I could turn on the border and I could set the weight, and the border will get nice and thick all the way around. We've now added the ability with this button here to control each of the corners individually. So if I wanted to set or each of the borders individually, so if I wanted the bottom border to be thick, I can control that now. I can now have access to control to either turn off borders individually or set individual padding. But it's not just the padding that we've got the capability for doing that for now as well. Previously with corners, you had a slider and it changed the corners and it moved and changed all the corners. What we can do now is we've got the same button. We can now go in and we can set individual corner padding as well. So you can start coming up and creating different looking primitive and simple objects, but it gives you a bit more flexibility now in what you want your components to look like. So it's not just the rectangle we've applied it to a number of other components as well. So if we have a look at, say, for example, text label and go to the properties and look at the background, we've got the option now for borders. Again, we've got the same option now where we can control each border individually as well. So we've got more control now over the aesthetics. We've tried to roll it out where it makes sense as much as possible across all the components that have got borders and border radius. There's a couple of components where it's not been applied to, things like the charts, because that becomes a lot more complex when we're working out what's happening with the internals of the chart. But for things like text labels and inputs and rectangles and primitive shapes, that independent control gives you a lot more flexibility now to give you the aesthetic that you're after. And following on with the similar sort of independent controlling, previously, if we wanted to add padding onto a text label, so say, for example, my text label is left aligned and I wanted to indent this in from the left, I'd have to have gone padding. But what happens there, that's applying padding to left and right and top and bottom. So as you can see there, it looks like it should have fit, but it's actually wrapping because the padding is going in all the corners. We can now control the padding individually and only have the padding applied on one side as well. So we now got the control over the padding, so you've got a bit more flexibility of what we can do as well. So that is the independent control. If we have a quick look at the rewritten and created color picker, so if we click on the swatch to open the color picker, we've now got control, and we've got the ability to control color and gradient, and color and background, similar to what we had before. We've got the recent colors as well, but it's a new refreshed design. This has been completely rewritten from the ground up, and it gives us more flexibility to do more complicated layouts as well. So I think if I go into this one here, for example, I've now got the option. We've only applied it to the rectangle and the canvas, but we've now got the option for gradients. So we can add more control now over really horrendous color choices, but it gives you the option now where you can start building up different effects as well. So we've applied it to the rectangle and we've also applied it to the main canvas as well. And we're looking to evolve this over the coming releases to make other components more gradient aware. And we'll apply this capability on things that it makes sense. We're not going to give you the ability to do gradients on text because that'll be really complicated to do and could lead to some horrendous looking visuals. But for other things where you're looking at blocks of data, blocks of color, sorry, for example, then we will look to, over the coming releases, make those capabilities and those features gradient aware as well. So that is those two. Next one, Mel, do you want to share for GTM?
So Google Tag Manager, let me share my screen a second. We want this one. Okay, so what we've done is added a property to, let me just open, let's just start a new project here. So you may be aware of project settings, which came in the last release. I think that came with 1.16, and we've enhanced this further now with some more options, one of which is Google Tag Manager. So actually, if I hover over that, I don't know if you can read it. So it tells you what it does there. So you can add your Google Tag Manager container ID, and then any tags that are managed in GTM will be added to your published app. So it's just a way of getting the Google Tag Manager code into your project for whatever reason that you might have tags in use already. And this came about from, we had a couple of customers wanted to do things like this. So they were taking their published projects, locally exported, and then modifying the output to inject this sort of stuff. But now we're giving you the ability to add it in here. So what that looks like, if I just show you, we'll do it with our Tag Manager and we'll test it on this project. So here's Google Tag Manager. For anyone that's not familiar with it, it's just a centralized place to manage all the tags. So this could be things like Facebook pixels or LinkedIn tags or Google Analytics tags, things that you want added to the code of the page for tracking purposes. So here it is, our container ID here. I'm going to grab this one. We want to go into this container anyway. And if I go back to Squirrel and we paste that one in there and say OK, and when I publish this project now, I go ahead and publish that to the cloud. We'll call it live. Publish that one. And you won't really notice anything because it's injecting the Google Tag Manager stuff into the page itself. So if I now go and open that in the browser, we don't know what's happening. I could inspect the page to show you it, but a better way to test that that has worked, if we now jump back into that one, back into Google Tag Manager here, and we can go into this preview mode where we can test whether the GTM code is found in a given page. I can connect that there. Now it will open our project in the window. It tells us we're connected. And if I go back to here, and what we can see then is that now on the load of this page, so window load, we can see that the various tags that we've got, Facebook pixels, etc., that they fired. So we know it's doing what it needs to do, and every time, anytime anybody loads that Squirrel project, it's going to utilize the Google Tag Manager container ID that's in there and work as if you'd put a whole GTM code in. Well, that is that one. I guess we could see it also, Rich. Just think if anybody's interested. I don't know if I can get out. I can. So here, this is what we're inserting, and there's that tag ID there. So you can see it in the page.
So this is to allow you to put in your own Google tags and your own tracking, like Google Analytics on your own project. So if you wanted to track usage and views, but with GTM, you can also add in other things. So we've got some customers that are adding in things like cookie consent or other in-app analytics, and they use GTM to deliver that. So using that one GTM code allows you now to inject a lot of additional capabilities into your Squirrel project as well.
One of the things that'd be worth us having play with and testing out is things like sort of in-app onboarding and user flows in products. So you can use GTM to add that code. What I haven't had a look at yet is to see how easy it is to identify items or elements within the Squirrel projects, to see if you can kind of point at things and kind of have guided in-app tutorials and stuff. So it'd be an interesting one for us to have a look at and see how difficult that is, and what, if anything, we would need to do in terms of enhancing Squirrel to support that. But that's another use case there that could be
definitely
of interest.
Definitely. Okay, so the next one then is the custom CSS and code. If I jump back into Squirrel now, there we go. Let me just start a new project. In fact, I've got a point here. So we've got a value in a Squirrel spreadsheet here, which is a really complicated formula that just basically comes up with a random number and then formats it to make it look like X number of $1 million. And then we wanted to have a text label that says this year's profit was, and then the value, which is great. But we want this number here to stand out. So we want to make it bold, we want to make it blue, or make it red to make it stand out, so we can make it look and like it's part of the text. So that at the moment with Squirrel, you can't have in text label formatting, but with support for custom CSS, we can do a little bit of magic to make that work. So if we have a look here, this one here says this year's profits was the value in F2, and then some more text. This next cell down here is the same, but I've just put in a little bit of CSS, which is basically wrapping the value in the CSS with a class called blue. So if I bring this down here and connect this layout to cancel that, connect this text label to that one there. At the moment, it looks identical. But if I now go into the file, project settings, and custom options, we've now got the option to add custom CSS. So I can say I want to create a new class called blue, and this is going to be the color of blue with my mouse. Font weight bold. And if I click on OK, you can see now it's now interpreted that, and it's added that into the Squirrel project. So as you publish the project both locally and to the cloud, it will also append any custom CSS that you do. So this is kind of like a really rudimentary example, but with custom CSS, you can start doing a lot more complicated and more fancy things. So Mel had a project the other day that she wanted to change what the bullet points look like on a bullet list, or change the position of those. And previously you'd have to have layered lots of components and move things around. So for example, here previously we would have had to have done a text label with this year's profit was, then another text label with the value, and then another text label, which is great. But this value got bigger and bigger, then it could have the risk of overlapping other text. But now having the ability to add custom CSS gives you that ability. It's a bit more advanced than the standard Squirrel use cases, but it does give you an awful lot more flexibility now to start doing inline changes and providing a lot of customization to your output as well.
Yeah, Rich, we have support for HTML or inline HTML within the text label today, but it's really limited on what we were supporting, wasn't it? So the classes, really, that custom CSS option is going to extend that beyond what we natively supported. Because I think it was like you could make things bold. Trying to think what else in terms of HTML elements that you could add or wrap your text in. Support for probably maybe paragraphs and headings or something, I'm not sure, but this is kind of breaking us out of the limitations for the HTML and our text label.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
And these are saved now into your project. So when you reopen your project, all these get this CSS gets saved as well. So in a similar line, so this works both on publishing to the cloud and when publishing local. And similarly as well, we've got another requirement from a customer, which was the ability to add custom JavaScript code or custom code into their Squirrel project. So it could be something like this, which is Mel just to show the Google Tag Manager. If we want to use the legacy Google Analytics code, for example, you could now add this in here. And when you export to local, so the custom code only works on export to local. So when you export to local, this will now inject either the code you've placed in the bottom of the head tag, which is where the Google Analytics code needs to go, or at the bottom of the body tag, and you can start doing adding additional code in there. So it could be JavaScript, it could be other CSS that you might want to add in there, or it might be other things that you want to append onto the bottom. So again, we had another customer that wanted to have a cookie consent at the bottom of their page, just to track usage of that. And so then you can use this body tag here, or the bottom of the body tag, to add that cookie consent in. So on local export, they can have that or injected in automatically for them, and that saves in the project state. So every time you export, that comes through as well.
Rich, we're putting it at the bottom of the head and the body tags there. Some of the snippets of code that you might want to add to a project, they often say that it should go directly after the opening head tag or something, but we're doing that because we don't want anything to interfere. Is that right, with the loading of the?
Yeah, so we've got two places. You've got bottom of head. So the way it works when you load up a web page, it goes from the top down. So it'll, usually you have all things like your meta tags, so like your Facebook and Open Graph, all the imagery and that sort of stuff in there. Some of the GTM stuff goes really, really high up. So it's one of the first things you load when the page loads up. As it goes down, the head is like setting all the foundations. Then you've got your body, which is all the actual application, what your project looks like. So if you put a bit of code at the top that takes a long time, for example, that will then slow your browser down. So it'll load that code up before it loads the main content. So there'll be a period of time where your page might be white for longer. Google's code is very, very efficient, so it doesn't add any delay, but that's the difference. So at the head, it will run the JavaScript before it starts loading the page. And at the bottom of body, it means load the whole page. And at the very, very last thing, then do this. So depending on the position or where you want to do it, and most things like Google Tag says, put it immediately after the tag. We put it as the very last thing in the tag, but yeah, it's the same, exactly the same thing. Yeah. Or at the very last thing in the body means load the whole page up, get the Squirrel project loaded up and showing, and whilst it's showing, then put my code in at the bottom. That means that any code you inject at the bottom won't add any lag or delay onto loading that page up.
Got it. And we do no validation on the code in either the style code window, so the custom CSS, or the JavaScript code here, do we?
The code here in the JavaScript side, we do absolutely no validation, no sanitization, because it's only supported for local export. So you put your code in there, it's up to you to make sure it's right. With the style, the way that it's injected into the application, it's injected as a style. So if you put in some JavaScript or some text in there that's incorrect, it will just insert it and not do anything with it. So it needs to be valid CSS, but there's no at the moment there is no CSS validator in there that says, oh, you've made a spelling mistake or something. So if I spelt color correctly with a U in it, for example, then there's nothing in there to say it's wrong other than the browser not working properly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. And last one then is the enhanced repeat container. So if I fire that over to you.
I'll show you that one. Right, Brill. So this one is an easy one to demo. Where have I got it in here? Let's just load up this project. So I've got a project here. You may or may not be familiar with a repeat container already. What it essentially does is allow you to, it's always worked row-based. So think building kind of lists of items or tables of data. And typically you'd build your sort of collection of visual objects, lay them out how you want them in a row, bind the repeat container or bind the individual items to where they should get their data from, which would be typically, or it should be from the first row of the block of data, bind the repeat container to a block, and then it goes and magically fills it all in. We're going to see this in action, so it doesn't matter that I'm not just showing you that as I describe it. But what we've done now is added the ability to repeat that across columns instead, which is probably possibly a lesser use case, but there are some scenarios where it would be useful. So if I just show that now. So we've got, for example, kind of like a profile picture, a name, and some information, description. here, if I go, let's just kind of tidy this up a little bit and make a sort of kind of like a repeating card layout. Let's do my rectangle behind this stuff and make it white. I'm just going to build up a card. Here we'll probably have a drop shadow, probably round those corners a little bit, and I will modify that drop shadow because the default's a bit heavy for what we want. Does that look like a card there? Yeah, just about. Hopefully you can see that. Let me just line this stuff up a bit neater. That's just the perfectionist in me in action. So I've built this card here with the data that we could see. Each one of these components are bound to a bit of information sitting in my spreadsheet. So, for example, the picture for the profile picture, I'm getting that I'm grabbing that from the internet. It's like a hosted image. In this scenario, there's a website that generates all these avatar images for you. And that's unique for each one of these rows. But I've just bound this component to there, and then I get the name from the same row. So the name is coming from the name field over there, and then I've got some description info here, which, as we can see, is coming from my description column here. So all those things bound to this first row here. I'm not using email in this example. So the easiest way to demo this, if I now group these elements, is that all the elements? Yeah. Group those. So I've now kind of created this card, if you like, and styled it and bound it to its source data. If I now bring on a repeat container, we've got this new option in here. So it's always worked on a row basis in the past. If I show you what that actually looks like in practical terms, if I were to throw a card layout like this, which has items sort of vertically arranged or stacked in it, into our repeat container, if I were to do that and I'm on row based, then it's repeating. Let me just move this so we can see it better. Then it's going to repeat it in rows. What we actually want is to repeat that in columns. So hence this new option that we have available to us here. And it puts this sort of ghost version of it off to the right to kind of show you what you're doing. But where it gets really cool, and this hasn't changed, it's the same for row-based containers as well. So if I now, because I know I bound my items, I've got my data formatted in a block like this. If I now say repeat, create a column for every row, basically, in this data set here, and do that, and then what I get, if I go into the preview, let me just turn scroll bars on and make that bigger. So it's now going to fetch actual data, put the scroll bars on, and just with one group of objects and a block of data bound like that, it's automatically, dynamically generating all those objects. So just nice that we've now got that option. So it's a bit of an overview of what repeat container was, which you probably already know, but we now have this column option available to us. The important thing, which is maybe not that intuitive, maybe it is that you still lay your data out in rows, but choose to display it in columns. So just something to be aware of. But yeah, pretty neat. I like it. That's that on that one, Rich.
Okay. If I just take the thing, and that's the end of the demos and stuff. I'll just share that one. Yep. So independent border, thickness and rounding, padding control. The new color picker only introduce the color pickers across the board for everywhere. The gradient awareness is only on a couple of components, but we'll start to look to introduce those over time. Google Tag Manager, as we've shown, custom CSS and custom code, and now that horizontal container as well. Other thing then, if the eagle-eyed of you would have noticed that both Mel and I have been demoing Squirrel, not in the desktop version of Squirrel, but in the Squirrel browser version. So this is another thing that we've been working on. It's not being released just yet, but we are working on a beta coming soon. So basically over the past few months now, since the beginning of the year, we've been working on bringing the design experience of Squirrel Designer into the browser, so that this is to coexist alongside the desktop version of the tool, but this is to allow us to consume and use the Squirrel application in different ways and different means and mediums as well. So we've been demoing the Squirrel in the browser. You can see we've got a redesigned front screen here with templates, updated recent projects. So it's not only loading up the files recently. If I go into a project here, for example, as I'm saving it, it's saving it not onto my local device, it's now saving it into our own file system here, so we can go through and have a look at a file system here. But because of why it's being saved into the cloud is that it gives us the ability to do auto saving. So as you start getting with other SaaS products, we start auto saving and putting those automatically behind the scenes into your file system as and when changes occur. And as a result, we've now got the ability within the Squirrel project to have version control and version management. So you can now roll backwards and forwards. So if I click on the little cloud icon, the green tick there means that I've got no unsaved changes. If I move, let's say, move that box around, you can see it's identified that there's an unsaved change. But what I can do is I can click on the cloud. I've got my autosave turned on. Click on my version history. I can now look at all the previous versions that I've made today. And I can choose to go back to a previous version, so go back to the very first one, which has got nothing in it. There we go, nothing in it. I don't want that one. Let me cancel that and I'll go back to the version. So now it gives you the ability to not only automatically version and roll back to those, but you can kind of have a look and see what's going on with the different versions as well. And that's just happening behind the scenes for you as well. Another feature that we've added in as well is an image library as well. In the Squirrel desktop tool, you can upload a local image and it uses it. But if you want to save your company logo, for example, every time you want to use that in a project, you have to upload it. Remember where you saved it on your laptop or your computer, upload it again. Now with the asset library, you can see here, I've uploaded a local image. I've now got that available for me to use. And it gives you a list of all the images that you've got and all the images that you've used in projects, so you can reuse those in the project as well. And that's another new feature that we've added. Any other dib stuff, Mel, we want to show? I think that's it at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, you've done covered file manager, asset library, version management. That's the main new stuff that's coming with dib.
So what I'll do is after this call's finished or the session's finished, I'll put a post on the community. If anyone's interested in trying the or being part of the next testing and the beta for Squirrel in the browser, then just put a comment on there. We're collating a list of people who are interested, and then we can get that rolled out in the coming weeks to get that available. We want to get this out sooner rather than later. We've been using it in anger now for a number of months, and we're just kind of finished getting rid of the main big bugs. So we're looking now to kind of put it through its paces a little bit more with more testing. So if you're interested, then please put a comment on the community post, and we can include you in the next beta. Anything else, Mel, or is that?
I think that's it. That's us. It's all 117 and more with design in the browser.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't think we haven't had any questions in. Nobody's raised their hand, so that's all good.
If you do come up with any questions or you think of something you'd like to more information on, then just pop something on the community and we can respond to that, or we can share more information if you want more information on certain pieces, definitely.
Bro, nice one.
Okay.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.